We learned so far that because the week of Noach is the first work of actual activity in the world, it's a pivotal week. It has a general power for the entire year, and that's why this Shabbos is a time to make an accounting to see if where we wanted to go on Shabbos Bereshis is a place that we actually did go. And we discussed yesterday the appropriate way of making a spiritual accounting on yourself, and how the different methods. And the conclusion is, try to, when in your spiritual accounting, you should endeavor to be the way you dream you can be, and therefore focus on the details of how to get there. In other words, it shouldn't be about the details and the minutia only. It shouldn't be about you just skyrocketing to some other zone where the issues do not exist. Rather, you should go to that zone, and in order to go, and because you're trying to connect to your best self, automatically you are going to upgrade the details with it. You're focusing on the details also with the intent of getting somewhere. So on that note, we went into the discussion about where the Jewish people are in general in history, and the spiritual accounting of where we are, period, vis-a-vis the coming of Mashiach. And based upon all of the merits of the Jewish people throughout the time of the exile, it's clear that we are deserving and should expect the coming of Mashiach. And despite the fact that we all know personally that we have issues to work on, that doesn't take away from the Jewish people being ready for the coming of Mashiach. And it's analogous to a person who is completely healthy, and he has just one little he has one tiny issue in one limb in his body, and just needs to heal that little issue. But the person in general is ready. So, and therefore, because we are ready for the coming of Mashiach, so the Rebbe says that understanding should lead us to be especially careful about the way we do Kiddush Levana. Kiddush Levana has a direct relationship to the theme of this spiritual accounting. Why? Hashem promised Noach in this week's Torah portion that day and night in the world will always continue, that the moon and the sun will follow the path that God set out before them. And as we say in the blessing of Kiddush Levana, you gave them a chok, a rule, and a zman, and a time. The rule refers to the fact that God allotted the sun to serve during the daytime, and the time, and the moon during the nighttime, and the time refers to the specific orbit of the sun and the moon, that the sun's orbit is in 365 and a quarter days, and the moon's orbit is in 29 days, 12 hours, and 793 halakim. This renewal of the moon works in the following way. It's not just that the moon just suddenly appears fully at the beginning of the month. Rather, the moon is constantly changing. So the blessing of the moon is about the renewal of the moon after it is completely hidden, and now it appears after it's being completely invisible. So what's so good about this? Why is this especially related to the coming of Mashiach? The Gemara says that anyone who says a bracha on the moon is like they received the Shekhinah. Why is it like receiving? It's as if you visited the divine presence. Why? Because, as we say in Kiddush, we say if the Jewish people had a merit to see their Father in heaven once a month, that's what we're doing in Kiddush. We're, so to speak, seeing our Father in heaven once a month in a special occasion, and therefore we should recite it standing. That's what we say. We say those words in Kiddush, extolling the value of saying Kiddush. It's like meeting the Shekhinah, like meeting our Father. Why is it so special? Why is it like meeting Hashem? Because during the time of exile, we do not see the divine presence. But the renewal of the moon symbolizes how just like the moon has renewed, so too the Jewish people who count their calendar according to the moon, they will also renew. And therefore we make a bracha about the renewal of the moon, because that indicates how we will also be renewed as a people, and we will also merit to see our Father in heaven. We're sort of like attending an event of our wedding, says the Torah on the Ramah, on the time of the renewal of the moon, because when Mashiach comes, will be the marriage of the Jewish people and Hashem, and the moon's renewal indicates that this will happen. So we're like looking at a sign of the coming of Mashiach. We're looking at a sign that we will be united with Hashem, and therefore, just like at a wedding you're supposed to dance, so too we're supposed to dance when the moon is renewed, because we're looking at a picture of really our own renewal, of our meeting the Shekhinah, of our being face to face with Hashem. It's a sign of how God will reveal Himself with the coming of Mashiach. So that's the simple meaning of why the moon's renewal is associated with the coming of Mashiach. But it gets deeper. The moon and the sun are compared to the divine energy that animates creation. The 10 utterances that God used to create the world are associated with the moon. And just like utterances, just like words are animated by the feelings and the thoughts you have in them, so too the sun represents the divine energy that animates the 10 utterances. So for example, on the day one of creation, when God says, "Let there be light," those are the words that God is using. What's the energy of that day? The energy of the day one of creation is chesed, God's kindness. So there's the energy of the word and there's the word itself. The creation on day one, because day one is associated with kindness, our creation is associated with kindness. So God made water and God made light, because those creations are associated with chesed. So the revelation of God in the energy that animates the world has changes. It's not symmetrical. The revelation that goes into the world and the revelation that is higher than the world. There is a tzimtzum, there is a contraction. There is something that we receive from the godly energy be higher than the 10 utterances, and there's something that we're not receiving. Just like the sun shines in the moon, and there's a constant change of what the sun is giving to the moon and how the moon is receiving from the sun, so too there's a constant change. It's not in the symmetry of the light of God's higher revelations and the revelation that we receive, the revelation of the moon, the revelation that goes in the world. The reason why we compare God's words with the moon is because just like the moon receives the light from the sun, so too the utterances that God uses to create the world, those words of Hashem, they aren't really a new energy. Words are just a means of communicating to someone else. Words aren't about a new energy, they're just about communication. Words only receive the energy that you put into them, the intellect and feelings that you are using to communicate. So the sun is analogous to the higher godly energy, and the moon is analogous to the energy which is within creation. So when Mashiach will come, it says that there will be the perfect union between the sun and the moon, meaning the perfect union between the light of God that is above creation and the light of God that is in creation. And therefore, in the world itself, in the physical reality, there'll be the revelation of the higher godly revelation that's beyond the words of God. That's why when Mashiach will come, the moon will always be full. The moon will not diminish anymore. In the language of chassidus, the moon is like the diminishment of the moon becoming smaller, is associated with the name Elokim, God's contraction. And the sun's light is compared to Yud Kei Vav Kei, God's revelation. So there is a time when God tells us that the moon has to get smaller. There's a time when God tells us it's time to go into exile. And I want you to, in exile, to do mitzvahs and Torah. And the moon is not going to be fully shining. There's not going to be a full revelation. But the purpose of this concealment of godliness in the time of exile is only in order that we should receive the full light of God with the coming of Mashiach. So the renewal of the moon in Kiddush Levana is analogous to the full revelation of Yud Kei Vav Kei into Shem Elokim. That in the world, the lowest of all worlds, in a place of a contraction of godliness, in the place of Shem Elokim, there should be the revelation of Yud Kei Vav Kei, which not only Yud Kei Vav Kei has many different, as we learned before, Yud Kei Vav Kei has many different levels of which divine reality it is representing. As we learned before, that at the conclusion of Yom Kippur, we say Hashem is Elokim 7 times. Why are we saying that? Compared to a higher revelation, the previous revelation is considered like an Elokim, like a concealment. Compared to even higher revelation, this new revelation is also considered like a concealment. And so, since on the conclusion of Yom Kippur, we are experiencing higher and higher revelation as we accompany the Shekhinah back to its divine source, so therefore we talk about, we say again, Hashem is Elokim, and compared to what it was before. Hashem is Elokim therefore has 2 meanings. One meaning of Hashem Elokim is that in Elokim, in the place of the concealment, in the world, in this world that is the lowest vis-a-vis its revelation of godliness, in the lowest of all worlds, there is a revelation of Yud Kei Vav Kei. There's a revelation of the truth of Hashem. So the place, the concealment, receives a full revelation of godliness. That's one meaning of Havayu Elokim. And there's another meaning that not only is there a revelation of Yud Kei Vav Kei, but in comparison to the revelation that God will give us and Mashiach will come, what we call today revelation, that's just a contraction. So Kiddush Lavana, when we're celebrating the renewal of the moon, what we're really celebrating is the revelation of Yud Kei Vav Kei, the revelation of the infinite light of Hashem in the world. It's not only that the moon renews, and therefore we celebrate it because it's the sign of our renewal. Rather, the actual renewal of the moon is representation of the kind of revelation of the coming Mashiach. The renewal of the moon is the revelation of the infinite light of Hashem in the world, in the place of concealment. So the moon gets smaller. There is a concealment of godliness. The purpose of the concealment of the moon is in order for there to be the greatest revelation of the coming Mashiach, so that there should be Noach. As we learned earlier, Noach means that there should be tranquility, there should be the coming of Mashiach, that God's desire of having a home in the lowest realm should be fulfilled. And we achieve this in the place of the concealment of the moon, in the place of the concealment of godliness. Elsewhere, chassidus talks about how God says the purpose of the sacrifice, the Korban Tamid, I think, is the purpose of the sacrifice. God says, bring an atonement for me because I made the moon smaller. Why does God need an atonement for making the moon smaller? What does that mean? So chassidus explains that in the moon becoming smaller, there is a reflection again of the tzimtzum, the concealment of godliness, so that a Jew is experiencing challenge in a way that causes him to fail, shalom. So the purpose of being in a place of where you can fail, a place of concealment, is by divine design to bring about the revelation of the coming Mashiach, which is represented by the full light of the moon. Okay, so if we've come to a conclusion that the coming Mashiach is necessary and it's meant to come, and everything that's needed for Mashiach to come is already there. So the focus should be, therefore, like it says, on the celebrating the renewal of the moon. Because the renewal of the moon, again, is about the renewal of the Jewish people. It's about the coming of Mashiach. What does it mean to be careful about reciting Kiddush Levana? So before we go into what it means practically, let's go to a few more details about the actual way we recite Kiddush Levana, how this reflects the coming of Mashiach. Kiddush Levana, we say, Dav Melech Yisrael Chai V'Kayim. We say Shalom Aleichem. What are those things doing in the middle of Kiddush Levana? We're talking about the renewal of the moon, so we say a blessing with the renewal of the moon. Why are we saying Shalom Aleichem? Why are you talking about Dav Melech Yisrael Chai V'Kayim? How King David will always live and his sovereignty will always reign. So we now understand about King David, because the moon's renewal is about the coming of Mashiach. It's about how King David and his progeny will always reign. And this will be realized in the coming of Mashiach, which is represented by the renewal of the moon. That we understand. But the Shalom Aleichem, why 3 times Shalom Aleichem? So Rabbi Yitzchak, Rabbi's father, explains that the first time we say Shalom Aleichem, we're talking about a revelation of godliness into Malchus, into the divine energy in creation. The second time we're talking about the elevation of Malchus, the elevation of the moon, of the sphere, of the energy of Hashem in creation, to receive revelation from higher than creation, about the moon being elevated towards the sun, about the energy of the 10 utterances being elevated towards their divine source. And the third time we say Shalom Aleichem, we're talking about the fusion, the convergence of these two energies. There's an advantage in both. There's an advantage of the divine revelation, an advantage of when the world is elevated and the moon is elevated to receive it. As Chassidus talks about how when there's revelation from above, so it's inspiring, but it's not something that you can internalize. When we elevate ourselves, so then we can only reach so far. We can't receive a higher kind of revelation. And the perfection of coming of Mashiach is when there's a convergence of both energies, represented by the third time we say Shalom Aleichem. So that's the spiritual meaning of it. Now, what do we have to do practically? Practically, the Rebbe says we should wear important clothing, and we should go outside and do Kiddush Levana. Even those places which weren't so careful till now do Kiddush Levana because they live among Gentiles. But nevertheless, they should go out in the street and do Kiddush Levana. And they should be careful also not just to wear important clothing, but also be careful about the time that they say Kiddush Levana. There are different customs about when you're supposed to say Kiddush Levana. So there is a custom of saying it after Shabbos. There's a custom of saying it after 7 days, as long as the 7th day of the month, the 7th day of the Moed, is before the 10th day. But if it's after the 10th day, then you're not supposed to wait till after Shabbos, because it's possible that there could be 2 or 3 or 4 days of it being cloudy. And depending on which country you live in, like the Tzemach Tzedek wasn't always careful to wait for, although according to Kabbalah you're supposed to wait for the 7th day, but it says that Tzemach Tzedek wasn't careful to wait sometimes because of the season, that it wouldn't be possible to do Kiddush Levana later on in the month. But every place should go according to its custom. The best way for that place to do Kiddush Levana: before Shabbos, after Shabbos, early in the month, later in the month. The Rebbe said this talk on the 4th of Cheshvan, and in the note over here it says that it's possible, according to those customs, who do not wait for 7 days to do Kiddush Levana right away on this coming Motzei Shabbos, like this year, which is the 4th of the month. Anyways, another main thing is the Kiddush Levana should be done with a special intent that we're trying to speed in the coming of Mashiach, and we're asking Hashem, Ubikshu as Hashem Elokeinu Zelle Malkum, as we say in Kiddush Levana, Jewish people should seek out God and David their king. That's the theme of Kiddush Levana. We're asking the coming of Mashiach. Never concluded Farbrengen and said practically we should merit that, as we read in Parshas Lachacha, in Mincha, the Shabbos, Hashem tells us it's time to go to Eretz Yisrael, it's time to come to Mashiach. And there, when Mashiach will come, we will bring the karbanos, and we merit to see the Shechina, and we will merit, as it says in the Torah, to see Elokim. Or as another verse says, we will merit to see Havaya, merit to see revelation of godliness. And then the conclusion of the Farbrengen, the Rebbe said, as we say, we talk about the union of the revelation, Kevav, Ken Elokim, in the prayer of Ne'ilah Yom Kippur. And they concluded by saying Shema Yisrael, and then he said Baruch Shem 3 times, and 7 times Hashem Elokim, and concluded with Hoshana Haba Yerushalayim. We see this happen not just next year, as the previous episode, not wait till next year, but today Mashiach comes automatically. Next year will be there, coming Mashiach. L'chaim.
So tomorrow night we should or shouldn't do Kiddush Levana?
No, we don't have to worry about doing Kiddush Levana this.
Thank you.
Shkach, Shabbos.